So I've talked about kind of common mistakes. I've talked about why validation is important and why it's worth the time. Let's talk a little bit about what successful validation looks like. Something we talked about earlier, calling back to that. There's no set rules for validation. And so you don't know whether you kind of have it or not. That doesn't mean we should just throw our hands up and not do it. And so there are things that we can kind of do. The name of the game here is we want to increase the chances that you are working on a good idea. I can't tell you for sure if it's a good idea, but there's things we can do to increase the chances of that happening. When you make the decision of whether you want to quit your job to start a company, I want you to have the highest possible confidence in that as we can get, given our kind of like time, resources, and kind of money. Again, you'll never get to 100%, but if you're at 10%, I would love to get you to like 40 or 50%. A lot of this is based around that. What can we do to get you there? Okay, so what does it actually look like? I talked about this before, but we want to be able to generate real world evidence that people want what you're planning on building. And again, sometimes people do it through surveys. Sometimes people kind of actually do signups. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about how to generate this real world evidence, but real world evidence is more compelling and more valuable of evidence than kind of a lot of other things. If the chances you're working on a good idea are 10%, generating real world evidence will give kind of like orders of magnitude better signal that you're likely on the right path. Second thing here is we want to be able to, through generating real world evidence, we want to gather user learnings. So we want to figure out, be able to answer questions like who your target users are and what do they want and why do they want those things and why do they care? And we want to be able to answer those questions. If you have answers to those questions, your probability of working on a promising idea goes up and you're probably going to feel better about it. Sometimes I talk to founders and they're like, they want to make some new dating app or something like that. And it's like, okay, it's a dating app nobody's ever kind of like seen before. And I'm like, okay, well, great. Who wants that dating app? And they're kind of not sure. And then I can kind of see it in their face. It's like, ooh, they know that's a question they should have an answer for and they don't have an answer for it. And so now they start doubting whether what they're working on is a good idea. And they're kind of having all this existential crisis. And I think having this concrete idea of, oh, I'm building this new dating app. It specifically solves this problem for this group of people. Maybe it's elderly people where dating is kind of much trickier and there's an elderly population. And oftentimes, I don't want to get to go dark, but like maybe there's like kind of a widows. And so it's just really hard for them to date. That's who I'm building. I mean, that's a much more compelling idea to me than just like dating a new dating app, right? So already like learning some of that stuff will just make it more concrete, make it a little bit more compelling. And the final thing here is, and I think about generating real world evidence and user learnings, these things help you build objective conviction. And I say objective conviction, not just conviction, because I often find that when I'm talking to founders, they do have conviction that their idea is a good idea. I would debate with them about how objective it is, but they have conviction. It's undeniable. They really do believe that their idea is a good idea. And so what you want to generate is not just conviction, you want objective conviction. And that needs to come from the real world evidence that you've been able to generate and kind of the user learnings and these kind of facts that you're like working on. You want to take it away from kind of like remove as much kind of opinion and all of that as kind of like possible. And so successful validation is not to me, oh, I found out I should work on this idea. That's one possible outcome of successful validation, but I think successful validation is just as equally valuable if you find out an idea is not promising. So to me, successful validation is building objective conviction one way or the other. And again, finding out your idea is not that promising, it's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Actually, most of the time you validate, that's going to be what you find out. And again, remember that finding out now saves yourself years and tens of thousands of dollars and all of that kind of stuff. And so that inherently to me is great. And then you can kind of spend your time working on ideas that you do think are promising. Just as a kind of like a short thing here, when Brian and I were looking and working on ideas and stuff, we would be validating like 3 different ideas every week. And so before we actually got to an actual idea that we had strong conviction on was promising, we would go dozens of ideas where we're like, nope, this isn't it. Nope, this isn't it. And I think the thing that's really interesting is if you get the reps and you build objective conviction that ideas are not, promising ideas really stand out, like really stand out. I remember in some cases, it's like, look, we struggled to get anybody to sign up for one of our ideas. And then we have an idea and it's like 500 people signed up in 1 week. You start checking to see if you like if there's a bug or something broke because it's like so different. So to me, if you're doing validation for the first time and you feel like you're getting objective conviction that it is a promising idea, I would actually be skeptical because it's like the hit rate is not that high. And look, you might be the one, but it's also harder to tell because you haven't kind of seen all the others. And so to me, I'm kind of like, honestly, if I was doing validation for the first time all over again, I would just start validating any ideas just to get reps, just to see what kind of like building objective conviction on not promising ideas look for. And then, you can kind of work up so you have that as you kind of move on. So successful validation doesn't mean that you find out that idea is promising. You just want to be able to build this objective conviction.